From the Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View with your host, David Goins.
And I will faithfully discharge the duties of
the office of governor.
The office of governor.
A changing of the guard in Arkansas. Asa Hutchinson sworn in as Arkansas's 46th governor. Good Sunday morning to you. Welcome into Capitol View. I'm David Goins. Thanks for being with us. Inauguration Day and the Hutchinson administration underway a little later in the show. Plus, all eyes at the state capitol focused on the governor's impending health care address. I'll be joined by State Senators Jeremy Hutchinson and Joyce Elliott a little bit later. But we begin with the first ever female and Republican Attorney General in the state of Arkansas. Leslie Rutledge is our guest this morning. Attorney General Rutledge, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thank you, David, for having me on. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. You know, on Inauguration Day, the governor, rightfully so, gets a lot of attention. The 6 other constitutional officers, you all also got sworn in. Give me a sense of kind of what you're finding in the AG's office. I know just a few days in, but as you settle in, how this is all working.
Well, Tuesday was an amazing day. I had my parents with me. My father held the Bible. And we, a tremendous time taking office. We had done so much to prepare for taking office for the last couple of months in transition that when we walked in, we hit the ground running. The citizens of Arkansas, as far as we're concerned, we have not missed a beat in taking care of them and making sure that those services are provided, whether it's the consumer protection services or the training that we provide through law enforcement. And just on Tuesday, my first act was to speak to a group of law enforcement officers that were receiving a training from our office about school safety.
So. When you look at previous attorney generals, and I know you talked about this during the campaign, that you wouldn't, have your own bills you'd like to see passed. Can you kind of maybe remind folks why you don't really feel that's what you want this office to be? Because so much of an AG's presence we see at the state capitol in committee rooms lobbying for legislation.
Sure, absolutely. And the role of the Attorney General is to advise the legislators, to advise state agencies, and that's what I want to make sure that the Office of the Attorney General is doing. Certainly, we are reviewing the bills, we're talking to legislators, visiting with the governor's staff to make sure that what they pass out of those committees and out of the legislature and the governor signs, that it will be upheld if challenged in courts. That's the role of the Attorney General, is to make sure that we have solid laws that if they're challenged, that will be upheld, and to enforce and defend the law. It is not to have your own legislative agenda and package. We're certainly keeping an eye on matters that are of interest, such as human trafficking, cyber crimes, to make certain that whatever the legislature does pass, that it's legal and that we can aggressively go after these predators.
How did the transition go from Election Day up until now? Because I know at one point, I think in December, I reached out to you. I was looking to maybe talk with you, and one of your representatives told me that you were going to interview people all day long, nonstop, a staff of well over 100. How that all kind of plays out?
A staff of over 170, and I interviewed every one of them individually. We conducted a number of external interviews as well. That was a wonderful learning tool for me and my transition team, as well as for the staff to get to know me. And from that, we were able to make decisions with regard to personnel and make sure that my vision for the office of going after criminals, internet predators, what we want to do with consumer protection to make certain that our citizens are taken care of, that we're able to see that vision out, if you will, and to have I told everyone that came through, my interest is being the best lawyers in the state on behalf of the citizens of Arkansas, and to do everything to the letter of the law and to enforce and defend the law.
You mentioned not wanting to push a legislative package, but there are things that you want to see done. A lot of that you talked about in the campaign as far as federal oversight, federal overreach goes. I know your predecessor, Attorney General McDaniel, filed kind of at your request dealing with the executive action that the president took as it relates to undocumented immigrants. Your thoughts on that particular issue, and what other similar items do you want to pursue?
Sure, and one thing I did talk about, as you mentioned, was federal overreach and the role of the Attorney General's office in combating that. That is why I went to my predecessor and asked him to go ahead and join that immigration lawsuit on behalf of Arkansas. And that is a prime example, and the Congress is dealing with it now, of where the president and his administration went beyond the scope of what they're allowed to do and forcing states to implement things. We're also looking at the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, their regulations that they force on states.
Specifically the clean air.
Yes, the 111D proposed rule on the carbon emissions. That is something that we have had our eye on from the very beginning. I know that Governor Hutchinson has also had his eye on that as well, and hope to work with the governor's office on these.
Okay, so on the EPA rule, no thoughts have changed on that at all. Obviously, the rule, we know it's not final till what, June, but the kind of philosophical theory is try to stop it before it ever comes out.
Yes, absolutely, because once those rules are put into place, as we've seen with so many things, it's hard to unring the bell.
Same-sex marriage, a couple things. One, I know just before McDaniel left, they filed a notice to appeal to the 8th Circuit. How is that process going? Do you expect that to actually get to a point where it'll be heard in St. Louis, or based off of what we learned late on Friday that the U.S. Supreme Court is ultimately going to take up this issue at some point, that perhaps that Arkansas's case doesn't get there?
We are moving those appeals forward. Assistant Attorney General that had argued that case will be in the state Supreme Court, will be handling that case as well. Colin Jorgensen on behalf of the state of Arkansas. We are going to continue appealing those cases and moving them forward. And the United States Supreme Court may very well, in fact, hear a case that affects Arkansas before the 8th Circuit makes its decision, or before the Arkansas Supreme Court makes its decision.
So still some work to be done there, and that's something I think you feel at some point the U.S. Supreme Court's going to have to make a decision on? I
believe that they will, yes.
Okay, makes sense. One thing I wanted to also look at is you mentioned, the amount of drug courts that are out there. I know that's something you've talked about as well in the last minute here. Governor Hutchinson's talked about wanting to increase the amount of drug courts as a way to have fewer people, go through the prison system. Is that an emphasis in your office?
It is, and one thing that I believe the governor's talked about, I know I've talked about for a number of years, is lowering what's called the recidivism rate. So once individuals have committed a crime, that they don't continue to go back to prison or continue to commit those same crimes. And that's why drug courts are so important and can be effective in that regard, because they change and save lives, and they alter people's patterns, they alter their actions, so that way, rather than falling back into the same bad habits and committing those criminal acts, they instead find a job and they become productive, good members of society. And that's ultimately, for the most part, who those people want to be and who we want them to be. Changing behavior, I think that's a term we've heard a lot from Governor Hutchinson. I anticipate we'll probably hear that more as well. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
Okay, we're off and rolling on Capitol View this morning. Coming up after a quick break, new governor we talked about heads to D.C. why Asa Hutchinson was in the nation's capital late this week, and what we could expect from his upcoming policy speech on health care. I'm David Goins. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
J. Oliver's Fine Jewelry is going out of business and the final countdown has begun. The vaults have been emptied and the final markdowns have been made. Up to 80% off just in time for Valentine's Day. No reasonable offer will be refused. J. Oliver's Fine Jewelry on Bowman Curve in West Little Rock.
Guess what goes really well with eggs? Pillsbury Grand's Biscuits make breakfast even better. Grand's Biscuits make breakfast pop.
I like to mix things up a bit with Grand's Mini Pot Pies. Only 4 ingredients and a few easy steps. Weeknight dinner in a flash, and my family devours them. Pillsbury Grand's Biscuits make dinner pop.
Enjoy more restful sleep, relieve sore muscles, reduce stress. How about coming home to a hot tub from Townley? Hot Spring Spas feature the Ace saltwater system. It's virtually hands-free water care. Townley offers free-flow spas with plug-and-play technology, priced as low as $3,500. Fill it up, plug it in, and enjoy. Every day made better with a hot tub from Townley.
Ah, Townley.
At Tzatziki's, we appreciate your business. That's why we work hard to create a fresh, casual, and delicious dining experience for every customer, every time.
At Tzatziki's, we consider it an honor to serve you a perfect meal, priced right with a smile.
At Tzatziki's, we guarantee delicious food and great service.
Join us at any of our Central Arkansas locations, Little Rock, Conway, and North Little Rock.
J. Oliver's Fine Jewelry is going out of business and the final countdown has begun. The vaults have been emptied and the final markdowns have been made. Up to 80% off just in time for Valentine's Day. No reasonable offer will be refused. J. Oliver's Fine Jewelry on Bowman Curve in West Little Rock.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back to Capitol View. Arkansas politics in high gear with a new session and the inauguration. But we start our look back with Governor Asa Hutchison's first trip out of the state. Hutchison spending most of Friday in Washington, D.C., meeting with U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Sylvia Burwell. On Friday, the governor's office characterized the visit as a fact-finding mission to learn more on what changes Arkansas could make to the private option that the federal government would allow. Expect to hear more about this when Hutchison makes his health care address on Thursday morning. That will be on the campus of UAMS in Little Rock. With a new session comes a new round of bills. Among the many filed this week, a new bill allowing faculty members at public universities to carry guns on campus. If it sounds familiar, well, a similar law passed 2 years ago, except that one had an opt-out clause, something that every public college in the state exercised. The version in 2015, no such clause. Now, if passed, staff members at a public university, college, or community college could possess a gun in the buildings and on campus if they have a concealed carry license. Also filed this week, a bill that would ban the practice of so-called webcam abortions, procedure where a woman takes a prescribed drug while her physician observes remotely on a monitor. So-called telemedicine abortion bill was filed 2 years ago, but other major pieces of legislation, social legislation, kept that one from being passed.
It is not currently happening in Arkansas, but it can start happening any day. And I think it's much easier to prevent it from happening than it is to come back after it started happening and stop it.
State Rep. Julie Mayberry pictured there plans to run that bill later in committee next week. Planned Parenthood of the Heartland opposed the bill, saying the intent of this proposed legislation is not about improving the lives or safety of Arkansas women. A federal court reviewing the decision to strike down Arkansas's law banning all abortions after 12 weeks of pregnancy. The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals in St. Louis took up the arguments on that law last week. The legislature passed the fetal heartbeat protection law 2 years ago and overturned a veto from former Governor Mike Beebe. Last year, a federal judge here in Little Rock ruled that the law was unconstitutional. No word when that 3-judge panel in Missouri will submit its decision. A major shift at the Capitol as Arkansas's 46th governor, as we talked about, takes over. Asa Hutchison took the oath of office on Tuesday afternoon.
It is truly a new day in Arkansas, an historic day, a day that many of us never thought would happen in our lifetimes.
Mr. Hutchison referring to the Republican sweep following last November's election. Republicans now control the governor's office, both houses of the state legislature, and all 6 constitutional offices. Now it's time for lawmakers to get to work. One of the biggest priorities is a decision on health care. Governor says, again, he'll make that speech coming up on the 22nd.
This is something we are passionate about. It's something that we must address. It is something that has not always been met with the greatest unity in this body.
Direction Hutchison takes on the private option will likely lay the groundwork for discussions, disagreements on both sides of the Capitol later this month. Now, Governor Hutchison says lawmakers should be ready to go with his income tax cut plan next week. Hutchison unveiled details of that plan on Wednesday. It will provide a tax cut for 500,000 Arkansans earning between $21,000 and $75,000 a year. In order to make that happen and to keep the budget balanced, the governor wants to put a tax cut approved 2 years ago on hold later this summer.
The legislators are asking the right questions. Well, you know, we need to see this in the context of the whole budget and making sure that it's a balanced budget and how it impacts everything. Fair questions, and so we're going to be presenting our balanced budget next week to make sure they have that information.
And on the other end of the state capitol, one of Governor Hutchison's strongest allies setting up shop in the Lieutenant Governor's office. Former Congressman Tim Griffin took the oath this week for that office. It sat empty for over a year after the previous Lieutenant Governor Mark Darr resigned in January of 2014. Griffin says he's keeping busy with a smaller staff. His goal, make the Lieutenant Governor's office relevant again.
I think there is a huge opportunity for the governor to have an additional person to help and with certain things and to rely on.
Griffin says he looks forward to advocating for Governor Hutchison's policies throughout the state. Hillary Clinton has not made her decision on a 2016 presidential run just yet, but that's not stopping the GOP from setting up shop in the state to do a little opposition research. RNC Chairman Reince Priebus telling Bloomberg News a research team of a couple or three people already in Little Rock researching former Secretary Clinton, presumed the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination. Priebus told Bloomberg, quote, "We're going to get whatever we have to do in order to share with the American people the truth about Hillary and Bill Clinton." The RNC also announcing this week that Republican presidential debates, they're already set to begin. They'll start in August of this year, scheduled 9 through February of next year. Well, when we come back, the 90th General Assembly already starting. I'll ask 2 state senators their thoughts on the future of the private option. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
The thing Wilson Auctioneers can do that the typical method of selling cannot do is we can get your property sold quickly, effectively to cash buyers that are going to close within 30 days, period. And that's one reason a lot of people hire Wilson Auctioneers to conduct their auction, because they know they're going to have a done deal. It's not subject to financing. It's not subject to anything. It's subject to closing within 30 days, and we attract qualified bidders.
Sold it, sold it, sold it, $1,750,000.
Let's see the starting lineup for KARK4 today. Aaron Nolan.
Bringing you more local news earlier than anyone.
Mallory Brooks.
Covering the topics you care about.
2 meteorologists on weather defense. Meteorologist Greg D.
Keeping you informed with weather on the 4s.
Meteorologist Natalie Walters.
Telling you what's hot on social media and what's up with traffic.
Start your day with KARK, your home for Super Bowl 49.
Just as it only takes a simple spark to light a fire, making small changes can lead to incredible, life-changing results when it comes to your health.
We've seen amazing advances in the fight against the nation's leading cause of death. Many of these have started with a personal commitment to lead a healthier lifestyle.
Join us as we continue to ignite change for good health at the 2015 Central Arkansas Heart Ball.
Come support the cause and have a wonderful evening, February 7th at this year's Central Arkansas Heart Ball.
Home. It's more than just brick and mortar. It's the place you first learned about the world. It's where your beliefs are shared. It's the neighborhood where you live. In the state we all love. We share the stories of our home. KARK4. Local news that matters.
Start your mornings with KARK4 today, weekdays starting at 4, followed by The Today Show at 7.
It's all about early, and I wanna be there.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back to Capitol View. With the session now fully underway, we're pleased to bring in our political long table for this weekend. She is a longtime Democrat senator from Little Rock, Joyce Elliott, and her colleague in the same chamber, Republican representing parts of West Little Rock and Benton, Jeremy Hutchison. Thanks so much for joining us. Good morning to both of y'all.
Good morning.
Thank you, David.
All right, so as we sit here with the governor in D.C. on Friday, essentially kind of looking to see what potential changes the state can do to the private option plan. Is that kind of, I'm getting a sense from really legislators on both ends of the Capitol are kind of just sitting back and waiting for Thursday. I'll start with you, Senator Elliott. What's your thoughts there?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of sitting back and waiting, which is difficult for me to do because I'd like to know what's going on. But we're talking about the totality of the budget, and the private option, I think, has to be, you know, a huge part of how we think about that. And so I don't know what the governor necessarily has in mind, but it's kind of interesting to me that he's in Washington at least talking about a plan that he might have, and I'm interested to know what that is. And so I'm just just try to maintain a stillness and see what bubbles up. But I hope not too many things to change the private option in ways that it's insurance in name only, and that we do so many things to it that it's not really worthy to the people who are benefiting right now. I really am concerned about that not happening.
When you say concerned about it being insurance in name only, what are you kind of referring to?
Yeah, because when we have the private option right now because of compromises, and I think some pretty big compromises. So I'm really interested to know what else is there to do to the private option that's going to make it better or make it worse. And at this point, I don't have a vision of the other things that we might do to the private option that's still going to make it something that is going to be, that will help the people who are being helped right now. That's a big concern. I don't want it watered down, you know, to the extent that it is just a name only.
Senator Hutchison, I mean, fair folks are kind of waiting to kind of see what happens on Thursday?
Yeah, I think so. I think the governor deserves credit for he's not going to Washington to throw ideas at the wall and see what sticks. I think he's going with a plan, with an idea. He's been working with members for weeks now, and so I think they have an idea of what would pass. It won't please everybody. It probably won't please me completely, but to get 75% of both chambers is going to take even more compromise. And as Joyce knows, I voted for the private option in its original form. But I think it's important, and I think it's good news for the hospitals and for the healthcare community and those people who are on the private option that we have a governor who's not waiting till the end of the session like we've had to do the last few times. He's making it a priority to find a compromise so that we can address it and then shape a budget surrounding the solution we come up with and move forward, and not let it be a toxic issue that reigns throughout the session.
So do either of y'all anticipate the governor on Thursday in any way addressing the private option in a way that would end the program?
I don't anticipate that. Mainly because I just can't imagine it, you know, because it's something that I think we've worked so hard to get, and something that's so integral to so many lives right now in our state. No, I don't anticipate that.
Nor do I. I think there'll be a continual study being done, as any program should be, continue to evaluate. But no, I don't anticipate an abrupt ending to the program.
Okay, so kind of in the order of things that we've seen so far in the session, we actually kind of have to go back a little bit, because tax cuts seems to be the first thing that the governor has talked about. That bill was introduced, you know, late in the week. As far as, you know, the details of how that would work, anticipate committees, revenue and tax, will take that up early next week. Is a connection between a tax cut plan and then going into healthcare, is that something that you're kind of watching as this unfolds?
Well, I don't know if it's a direct correlation. Certainly not reauthorizing the private option would put a major hole in the budget. However, there's been a lot of discussion of comparing Arkansas to Kansas, and do we cut too many taxes too quickly, and can we afford? Just to set context, we currently have, in the first 6 months of this fiscal year, $44 million in excess revenue. We have 6 months left in the fiscal year. We'll probably be approaching $100 million this year, and the tax cuts obviously don't touch any of that. The projections for FY16 are the tax cut will only be about $33.7 million in FY16. Projections are $160 million in surplus revenues. So that's 1/5. That's 20% of the surplus portion.
Right. So no comparison to Kansas is kind of the...
In FY17, the projections are $260 million in surplus. So reauthorizing the private option would certainly help the budget. I don't think it's fair to say that if we did not reauthorize it, which I don't think is going to happen, but if we did not reauthorize it, that we could not possibly afford the tax cut, because...
Senator, real quick, Senator Elliott, there's a sense that at least the tax cut option that the governor's thrown out doesn't seem to be a whole lot of opposition, or a sense that this is going to do anything too detrimental to the budget? There's a sense of, okay, let's give the governor his...
I don't know that I'm convinced about detrimental, because I don't think we know enough to say. I have not assumed it's going to be detrimental, but there's not opposition because, you know, and there's not opposition in some cases. There's not even favoritism because we're just waiting to see what it means to the entire budget. And you know, I'm not as convinced probably as my colleague here that there's not room to compare us to Kansas. There is a lot of room for us to take some lessons from Kansas, because who in the world can be against a tax break? Nobody is against that. But I always look at tax breaks, and I understand elections have consequences, and I think this governor will get to have his tax cut. But I always like us to think about, in the form of tax cuts, what does that really mean it's going to do for the economy? We've had over 10 years now of knowing that tax cuts don't spur economic development. That has not been the case. And so while it may be a good thing, and I'm just waiting to see, I think we also ought to line that up with thinking about the other things that we need to be doing while we're assuming our budget is going to be healthy. Like, what are we doing about funding pre-K? How are we going to handle the prison system? You know, what are we doing about highways? There are a lot of other things out there that I think could be a part of this conversation along with tax cuts. So we need to learn from Kansas, probably, that either we are going to go down the road of tax cuts and understand we're not going to do some other things, or do those other things, and the whole state is healthier. Okay, that might be a good spot here. As I know, we just got started, and he's ready. You Jeremy, started, Kansas.
ready to go, but yeah, that's going to be all the time we have for this morning. Senator Jeremy Hutchison, Senator Joyce Elliott, thank y'all so much for joining us. Just getting started. All right, we'll be back after this to wrap up this edition of Capitol View. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Are you having severe neuropathy pain with tingling or numbness or maybe burning in your legs or your feet? You don't want to take medications or have any kind of surgery? Maybe we can help.
For more info on this great Arkansas professional, go to arkansasmatters.com.
Kelly and Michael know how to brew the perfect morning. This is great.
What's in here?
A spoonful of laughs. Pour in some fun. And stir it up with some big surprises.
In 3, 2, 1.
For the perfect morning, just add Kelly and Michael.
I don't think this is what they meant.
We're going to have to drink our way out.
Weekdays at 11 on KARK4.
KARK4 News, capturing the images and telling the stories that have shaped this great state for 60 years.
Thank you for inviting us into your homes.
From the very beginning
to today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
All right, welcome back to Capitol View. That is it for this morning's show. Don't forget, you can stay up to date with Arkansas politics by following us on Twitter at Capitol View AR, and download the Capitol View smartphone app. It's just waiting for you in the iTunes App Store and Google Play. A lot to look forward to this week in Arkansas politics. We'll have it all for you. Brand new edition of Capitol View next Sunday morning. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Release a devastating avalanche of taste on your tongue. Bury yourself in the flavor full of sweet icing and filling. Call off the hounds. Rescue is unnecessary. Pillsbury Toaster Strudel, the snow day of breakfasts. Ho, ho, ho.
At 100 calories, not all food choices add up. Some are giant, some not so giant. When managing your weight, bigger is always better.
Ho, ho, ho.
Green Giant.
Kelly and Michael know how to brew the perfect morning.
What's in here?
A spoonful of laughs, fun, and stir it up with some big surprises. For the perfect morning, just add Kelly and Michael.
We're going to have to drink our way out.
Weekdays at 11 on KARK4. Start your mornings with KARK4 today, weekdays starting at 4, followed by The Today Show at 7.
It's all about early, and I wanna be there.
Home. It It's more than just brick and mortar. It's the place you first learned about the world. It's where your beliefs are shared. It's the neighborhood where you live, in the state we all love. We share the stories of our home. KARK 4, local news that matters.